supervisor, and that's the district of Willits, Laytonville, and Covelo. And so I'm on this ad hoc with John McCowan, the 2nd District Supervisor, and that's the Ukiah area. He couldn't make it tonight. He didn't realize that he was overbooked when we planned these meetings. But we're planning 3 of them. You know, we had one last night in Willits, we have this one, and we have one tomorrow afternoon in Covelo. So we're hoping to get input on any issues that deal with cultivation and the ordinance and where to go with our ad hoc recommendations to the board. And so that's kind of the process as we're having these meetings, and we'll probably have some follow-up meetings. We're looking at all the recommendations we get from like the Mendocino Growers Association, and they've submitted a list, and we're taking all the input from various sources, and we're going to try to come up with whatever changes we think we can do and help the small growers that we have in our community. So to keep our economy riding. What we've done on the board lately is that there is this issue of a corporation coming into the Round Valley area, and their business model was to use a type of GMO cannabis. And so we passed an ordinance that doesn't just deal with that situation, but updates our whole cannabis ban in the county. Because what was happening was the cannabis ban measure H from 2004, the technology has gone past what it was dealing with. And so we're trying to update it to keep the intent of that ban on GMOs. And so instead of just dealing with cannabis, we're dealing with all plants and animals that we're trying to ban everything that's within the new technologies. Okay? We have a moratorium on GMO cannabis until we can get an ordinance in place that will be legally sound and everything. And they're working on it. So right now we have a 45-day moratorium on the GMO cannabis, and we also have a 45-day moratorium we just passed on hemp, industrial hemp production. And that's to deal with the federal law that allows for this industrial hemp. We're not opposed to it, we just want to make sure that when we do it, we allow it, that it's allowed properly so it doesn't cross-pollinate and affect cannabis production in our county. So we want to make sure we get that right. So there's a moratorium on that too. We have some staff here from Mendocino County. So we have Sean Connell, who is the cannabis manager.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And we have Siobhan Holmes. And and we have Julie Akers.
Yeah.
Okay, from County Council.
Planning building.
Planning building. Okay. So anyway, if there's a technical question, they'll deal with it probably. And I'm here to kind of get the input, hear what you have to say, take notes. They will be recorded. And if you don't want it recorded, we'll delete that part. We'll stop the recording if you just say don't record it. And that's so I can take it back and John McCowan and I can listen to it. Okay? The other thing is with the accommodation districts, like up in Covelo and Laytonville, we're proposing that the setbacks from schools be reduced from 1,000 feet to 600 because that's in alignment with what the state has as their setback is 600 feet. And if you're going to have an accommodation district and you exclude a lot of that, the 400 extra feet, then it doesn't allow for that much accommodation. So that's a reason we're going forward with that. And we're also in agreement that we will be proposing out of this ad hoc to allow for flexible licensing, or also known as transferability. So those are some things that we're working on, and this is your evening to give me input, and so we are going to time it. We do want to get out of here. If we started like 6 minutes late, let's go till 5 or 6:36, and we do want to keep it timed. And so really, we're going to time it so each person has 3 minutes, and then if we have extra time at the end, we'll come back, let you go another round, okay? All right. So, do we have any speakers?
Yep. First one is Nat Buttrick, or Nate.
So I'm here just to be a squeaky wheel and just talk about one of the sunset zones. I have a cultivation license in the county. I am parallel to a parcel that has a cultivation license that's in sunset. So I am allowed to have a 5,000 square foot cultivation right next door to my neighbor who's going to be sunsetted out. So that's just an example. It's a bummer that he's not able to continue. And then also I represent a brand, a Mendocino local brand called Madrone. And Madrone is sold throughout the state of California right now. And a lot of the cultivators that are in those sunset zones have directly been feeding that brand. And so it's just really important for the people that are in those zones to be able to continue, because it's a domino effect with all the businesses, because we're all so connected to each other. So I'm here to be squeaky wheel. I'm really concerned about the sunset. I'm very concerned about the sunset. Extremely concerned. So that's what I would say.
All right, thank you.
Alan Harris.
Hi, I'm Alan Harris. I'm a Mendocino County cultivator. I live in a sunset zone. I'm looking for a way to continue to operate my business past May 2020. And the other thing that was interesting about the agenda tonight is kind of parallels with the Mendocino coastal growers dilemma, is that we're going to reopen rangeland for cultivation. Is that accurate?
Are we going to?
Yes.
That list came from what was proposed on November 16th by the previous ad hoc. And there was, those were items that did not pass on that note.
So basically, as a Mendocino coastal resident, the primary land type is TPZ. It feels like, it's not fair, right? Why not? How come if you're inland, you can expand into resource territories, and if you're living on the coast, you cannot? Especially where I live, or where I'm going to be kicked off of my business rather, will be kicked out of my R2 property. Anyway, that's what I have to say. I'd like some help with relocating my business or allowing it to continue to come home.
And along that line, there is another ad hoc that's just dealing with economic development in cannabis. And so that's with Supervisors Jurdy and Williams. And so they're looking at what can be done, like enterprise zones and those kind of ideas. Okay?
Ryan.
Hello, and thanks for having us today. My name is Ryan Richard. I'm the co-owner and operator of Woodbine Farms, an indoor cultivation located in RR2 zone of Mitchell Creek Drive. Our farm was the first in the county to receive a cannabis use permit. This use permit took 6 months to complete. We currently hold the only state annual cultivation license in the county of Mendocino. It's one of 10 in the whole state. The process to obtain this license took well over a year. We are close to the end of a solid year of construction that we have undertaken to bring our facility into compliance. This construction has employed many workers and contractors in our community and has cost us a great deal of capital. This one farm is projected to pay the county $60,000 in quarterly taxes yearly, not to mention the many well-paying full-time jobs we create and support in our communities. Indoor cannabis cultivation is the most economically sustainable type of cultivation we have in this county. Growing cannabis indoors in a controlled environment allows us to harvest very high quality flowers every 2 weeks year-round. This keeps our employees busy and a very consistent schedule, allowing us to have fresh, top-shelf product ready for market all the time. This farm is scheduled to sunset in May of 2020. This is not enough time to move our business. The infrastructure it takes to run this business has taken years to develop. The coastal area of this county, which is perfect for indoor growing, has almost no industrial zoning that would be appropriate for us to move to. I'm currently working with the Mendocino Regional Economic Development Consortium to address this very problem. We're developing a business plan that will create multiple agricultural business parks throughout the county. But the bottom line is that the year we have left before the sunset is not enough time for us to move our business out of its current location. I would like to ask this committee and the board of supervisors to help us come up with a fix to this problem. Either a change of language to the ordinance or a special use permit that would allow currently permitted indoor cultivators in RR2 zones to continue operating until a time when we can move to a more appropriate location. Thank you for your time.
Matthew, Lauren?
Yeah. I'm Matthew Warren, and I'm also a Mitchell Creek resident. I have a small indoor cultivation site in the R2 area, and I just want to echo what these guys have all said. We've worked so hard and long, spent so much money, trusting the system and trusting the plan and trusting the board that, if we just we did it the way it was laid out to do it, that there would be some pathway to a permanent annual license. And, the timing is really the issue. We understand if it's not going to be possible, but we need more time to move. These are our businesses, our livelihoods, our investments, our families. Whether it's the language, whether it's an extension to sunset, use permit, some remedy like that to allow us, to give us more time, reasonable amount of time to actually build a new business or relocate our businesses. That's kind of that's why we're out here. And these mostly indoor farms, now that we've been working with the rec market now for the year, there's a demand on the market, and there aren't a lot of indoor farms producing the quality of flowers. And I think the market would suffer, and the local economy would suffer, and the brand would suffer, and the trickle-down effect that Matt spoke of, I think, is really real. So I just want to advocate for some new, different fix for the R2 community. Thank you.
Paul Tilhinen?
Paul Tilhinen, sorry, that's okay. I am opposed to any extension. The Board of Supervisors passed the RR2 zoning and gave 3 years for the sunset. They reaffirmed that when they did not provide an overlay for the Mitchell Creek Simpson Lane area. It is not that you only have a year to make the transition. You've had 3 years. I understand the financial challenge, but 10 to 1, when the Board of Supervisors did a survey of the owners of property in the RR2 Mitchell Creek Simpson Lane area, it was a 10 to 1 opposed to an overlay. And so if there aren't 10 times the number of people opposed, that doesn't mean they've changed their opinion. So I would urge the Board of Supervisors to really stay the course with the decision that you have affirmed twice. Once when you set the 3-year sunset, and secondly when you did not provide for an overlay.
Julia Dakin.
Hi. I noticed that every single discussion point has the use permit language. And I just want to note that use permits are really expensive. They take many months and they're very public. They require public hearings, notices in local papers, postings at roads. And I'm wondering if we really want that. And it looks like a way to say that we're allowing something, but putting up major barriers to get there. And I just want to ask, can you tell us why all those major use permit requirements when something's fairly simple, like transferring a permit from one person to another person? Why should that require something so public, time-consuming, and expensive? And could we do something like an administrative permit or something simple instead?
Yeah, I think some of those things are being looked at. As far as the transferability, that's not requiring a use permit, my understanding. It would just be, the person would be able to apply in the same way that the legacy farmer had applied.
Okay, it says use permit.
It does say that.
Oh, okay. Well, that's, might be old, but you have anything to add to that, Sean?
I'm not trying. Tracy Housen.
Tracy?
Housen? Medical cannabis? Medical cannabis? I see no one. Ben Anderson?
Ben Anderson from the comp sheet. I wanted to briefly speak about 3C and D, the expansion provisions that you guys are all discussing, but it seems like it's limited to RL, Ag, and UR. And I have a 40-acre TPZ parcel with 4 or 5 acres of farmable land, and it just seems silly that I'm not going to be allowed to expand when all the inland parcels will be allowed to eventually. It's not as big of a problem as you guys are being sunsetted. I really feel for you guys. But, the coastal areas are, like you said, pretty much forest land, TPZ, etc. But there is farmable land there, and it seems silly to me not to let us expand if possible.
And you're permitted now?
Yes.
Okay.
Hannah?
Hi, I'm going to mention a few things that I briefly mentioned last night, just for the record, to reiterate how important they are. One is the criminal history issue that I wrote a memo on and that I strongly believe needs to be rectified. The coastal zone issue, I know, is allegedly coming forward sometime in May or June, and I just want to impress upon the ad hoc committee that, and I know that the board has been concerned about this for many years as well, but coastal businesses are dying in the meantime. So we've got to do everything that we can to support that process and make sure that it happens in a timely manner, and that with limited staff resources, the issue is prioritized because it's been 2.5 years that it's been promised. Also from last night, a process for appeals and appeals of denials and processes that are clear. With respect to the agenda that is listed here, I think that there was some really great discussion for the benefit of everybody else that wasn't there last night. I think that issues came up that were really helpful, and I think that they're worth repeating. First off, I had mentioned, and so did Casey, about the transferability issues for RL, TPZ, and FL, which are mentioned on here. I was really hoping that other zoning would be included also, because while the argument can be made that new permits can be applied for in phase 3, which there's discussion about putting that off, The reality is that there's double the setbacks and the water availability requirement. And so in fairness, if we're considering transferability, we should consider it for all currently permitted or in process farms at a lesser burden than for new applicants. So under existing rules of phase one, not increasing the setbacks or requiring the water availability, presuming they're in good standing with their local permit and that they're currently complying with all of the state agencies. Additionally, there was mention of delaying or eliminating phase three. And, you know, that was intended to try and allow those cultivators who are currently in process to have the benefit of time to be established. And I certainly appreciate that and understand that, but there have also been people, whether they couldn't provide the proof of prior cultivation because they were a renter in the past, and they didn't own the property, even though that they were cultivating there, or some other reason why they didn't qualify, even though they should have. They've been patiently waiting to apply in 2020. And so it's not just about people, or people who took a deal under Eyster's pay-to-play program and were on probation and had a term that he would not reduce the term of probation, and it prohibited them from being applicable. So there's a category of local people who have been here and legacy farmers that should be open in phase three, and at least for them it shouldn't be delayed or eliminated.
3 minutes,
Sorry?
3 minutes a speaker. So we're trying to make sure that we can get through everybody.
Okay, I will want another bite at the apple like the first time.
Okay, we're going pretty quickly through this, so we'll come back.
Thanks.
Right. Gabrielle Martin? Gabriel.
My name is Gabriel Martin. I want to extend a thank you for having this ad hoc committee meeting in the first place to hear the concerns of community. I like to also, as well as Matthew, echo the concerns of the Sunset community up in the Mendocino Creek area. I myself have a cultivation scene in the area that I've been engaging in for the past 10 years. I'm permitted with the county and am temporary licensed and will be receiving my annual license shortly. We, of the Mendocino Creek area, were a little surprised, but at the same time respectful of our denial of an overlay, whereas Laytonville and Covelo received theirs. I'd like to extend an acknowledgement to Paul and the concerned parties. As far as the situation goes, I respect their position. And I think that all of the cultivators in the room respect that position as well. I don't think any of us want to impact negatively our community. However, I must say that if we are able to seek and receive an extension, not a permanent situation, it would go far to allow us to adequately relocate. It's been pointed out that here on the coast, we do not have a whole lot of options. And we all live here. We all have families. We all have children in the schools. I'm not about to move up and out of the area. There are plans in place to provide for adequate cultivation for us, but they're going to take time to develop as well. I would like to see the board create a mechanism that would allow for an extension for us to be able to operate something that makes sense, that's not an open-ended situation, and a path forward. The use permit that we are required to obtain is good for 10 years, and the hoops that we have to go through are quite extensive, and we've all been good players in the game. The amount of farms in the Mendocino Creek area that are seeking this are a handful, 6 to 8 farms total. I think it's nothing out of the scope of common sense to say that we wouldn't be able to create a mechanism or a path that would allow us to adequately relocate with the proper amount of time. There's a lot of jobs that are at stake here as well. We're not just talking about money that we're giving to the county, but we're also talking about food on families' tables. This is something that I think needs to take into consideration. I'd also like to show support for a number of the agenda items. I think that there should be multiple permits allowed. I think that the acreage, the size of the permit should be increased. You know, all of these seem to be topics of increase. None of these seem to be detracting. And I think here in the Mitchell Creek area, all we're talking about is trying to get a chance to survive. And I think that our county would benefit greatly from allowing us to continue. I also think that we should look at the allowing of multiple different types of license types. We've lost some local producers of some manufacturing and edible companies that have been greatly appreciated, and I'd like to basically extend my gratitude once again for opening this up for discussion. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Judy Tillman, and I'm a former grower on the coast, and I currently own my own center. And like many of the other sectors, distribution sectors, labs, processors, all the other sectors of our industry, we have a ripple effect when our farmers are shut down. And I want to speak for finding some accommodation regarding the sunset, this sunsetting of our farmers. And I think that I'd like to shift the framework that public policy and democracy is meant to work toward the welfare of the majority. The economy of Mendocino County depends on a vibrant and thriving cannabis multi-sector industry. That's what we're working towards. It's been acknowledged now, it's taken us years to get there, but now the public policy makers in the county and the elected officials are agreeing that to replace forestry and fishing, the biggest chance we have of putting Mendocino on the economic map in terms of economic development, jobs, and good paying jobs, and bringing families and supporting families in this county is to support a thriving multi-sector cannabis industry. When we lose the farmers in the Mitchell Creek area or all along the coast or anywhere in this county, when we lose them due to policies that are created to accommodate a minority of people who don't want them there, that hurts and affects the whole economic development of our county. There's discussion, and I say this with great respect for all sides of the opinions that we expressed here this evening. I respect all the members of the Mitchell Creek community, but there's talk now about how can sectors, small sectors of the state of California go against what was voted in by the majority of the population of California, which is a living, breathing, regulated, and legal cannabis industry. You can't do that to wine, you can't do that to other things. I mean, why would that happen? So I think we have to respect the democratic process, and we have to take the whole notion of overlays is now being talked about as being challenged in court. But you can't allow a minority of people to say that the economic welfare of the whole county has to be set aside for their individual interests. So with great respect, that's what I want to pose tonight in support of lifting or finding accommodation for the farmers who are subject to the sunset clause.
Scott?
My name is Scott Zoran. I'm a small business owner in Mendocino, and I've owned this business for 17 years. I'm also a cultivator, and I also own property in the overlay and in the coastal zone. The coastal zone property had a 931 permit, so we did have a permitted road there, which has been shut down. The inland property has a 10,000 square foot permit. That is hurting, and my business is hurting. I have a garden store. My garden store has gone from 16 full-time employees to 2 employees. We are operating, from last year to this year, we had 1/7 the pre-orders of soil on the coast. So it's basically killing our business, and it's killed probably 14 full-time employees' opportunities. They've moved out of the area, most of them, because they couldn't find work elsewhere. So the ripple effect that I heard mentioned earlier is more like a tsunami, and it's really overwhelming small businesses. I spoke to the head of the Chamber of Commerce for Garberville. She informed me that the sales tax at that point, which was about 5 or 6 months ago, was probably about 70% down. That's across the board. That's not just cannabis-related businesses. That's restaurants, gas stations, clothing stores. What's happening is not happening fast enough. So all the good things which we're fully appreciative of, they're just not being implemented fast enough. And in the meantime, the analogy of fiddling while Rome is burning is, that's what it feels like. And I understand that we have limited resources in Mendocino County. And because of what we're seeing here, those resources are even more so limited, and we're requiring more of them. But unfortunately, that's all we've got. We're either going to operate permitted, and the tax dollars are going to go into the economy through taxing, and through fees and permits, or we're going to operate in the black market, which is the way it's been for 30 years here in Mendocino County. Unfortunately, that doesn't necessarily direct the funds where they belong. Schools don't necessarily benefit. And some of the other organizations that depend on the sales tax dollars, they're not going to get their money. But at least people will be able to stay alive and stay in business. So those are the two choices that I see. I don't see people, we're down to the bone right now. We've cut beyond the quick, and we're into the bone. And if things don't happen quickly, we're going to really lose a tremendous resource. I just don't see where Mendocino is going to have the opportunities to rebuild itself. We've lost fishing, we've lost logging, we're losing our edge in cannabis. I think I read recently that Humboldt County, is that 3 minutes? Okay, the end.
Hi, Adam Mitchell. I'm newer to the community. I'm very grateful for everyone's efforts to bring us to where we are today. And I very much empathize with those in the Mitchell Creek area that are concerned about where to move their businesses. I work with Group 1 Botanicals. We're a manufacturer in the area, and we realize that the local farmers, to remain competitive with this state marketplace, need policies that are going to help them. We have coastal farmers that don't have the ability for the arable land of Sonoma County. And we're going to lose a very valuable piece of this entire culture. And I want to do what I can to advocate a way to help this community maintain this economic lifeblood, to grow the legitimacy, to not force our farmers to go black market so they can do things at the scale to remain competitive. And I also want to be able to have special evaluation should we have legitimate environmental concerns, legitimate neighborhood concerns, to ask if a particular project is worth an exemption from policies that would otherwise forbid it. So thank you for your time and all your help.
Ms. Hammond Nelson.
Thank you. I'm going to pick up where I left off, which is actually reiterating that the use of administrative permits and full use permits, while it might solve one problem, such as a CEQA analysis, causes other problems. And that particularly with respect to what I'm calling legacy situations, where somebody was already permitted or in the permitting process, that the use of administrative permits and the use permits for changes and expansions should be really specially scrutinized as to whether or not that's narrowly tailored for what you're trying to accomplish. The state doesn't even require anything other than the owner to qualify, and that's it. So I think that we want to avoid the overuse of expensive and lengthy processes that burden our county staff as well. Additionally, the personal limit of 100 square feet, I know that that was very well intended. And what it is that both for adult use for your 6 plants, which is allowed and mandated at the state level, and your personal medical, which is up to 2 patients locally, are both limited to 100 square feet. And I understand that the intent was to try to make sure that those people who wanted to take advantage of saying that it was this or that were not getting away with not going through the permitting process. But at this point, I think that we need to figure out a way where we can balance that need with legitimate medical needs that are not being met, and figure out some alternative than just the absolute type restriction. Back to the coastal zone, I think that another aspect of the urgency for coastal zone people, and I'm separating this out from the subtopic of Mitchell Creek, I'm just talking about coastal zone, because Mitchell Creek is not in the coastal zone, it has its own dilemmas and issues. But the coastal zone people have zero way forward at this moment, and we don't know how long it will take. And what's happened in the 2.5 years since the board directed there to be a coastal amendment or a coastal plan update is that now those people, even if we move the dial and get them somehow in the next 6 months ready to go, there are no more temporary state licenses. So they will have to go through all of these expensive processes of permitting through local and other state agencies, and then they'll have to wait another 6 to 12 months to get an annual license. So, as Scott was speaking and others were speaking about the impact to the coastal community businesses that this economy is driven by, I don't know if there's any other thing that could be done to push this along faster, but it is at a really huge critical mass.
So that's at the county level?
Well, it's a county and state level, so what it is that it took all these years to get a consultant to write the coastal plan amendment update, and that hasn't yet been presented to the planning commission. So of course it's going to be on the on the coastal, first planning commission, then on the coastal commission, and it hasn't even been presented to either yet. And so that's the problem, and it literally the board directed this 2.5 years ago. And I know it's about to happen, but I guess I'm just trying to keep in the forefront the urgency so that people understand that even though there are limited staff resources, and I totally appreciate that, if we can knock it up a notch in priority through the rest of the process that has to happen, that would be really important.
Hey Hannah, I want to just defer to Julia Acker in the back. That is our chief planner for Mendocino County. I think she could probably provide a lot.
I'm Julia Acker, I'm the chief planner for the county, and I can say we've been reviewing the coastal ordinances. It's taken quite a bit because with the coastal zone aspect, we have to remember that even if we're in approval of it locally, we still have to go through certification with the state. So where we're at right now is I think we're down to very close to having a draft that we're ready to bring forward to Planning Commission, but it's taken quite a bit of back and forth. And we usually like to float that past the Coastal Commission first to make sure that we're catching any major issues before we start going through hearing. It helps reduce the time in the process. So we're really pushing hard to get to Planning Commission hearings really early, and just for the benefit of everybody, the process is first Planning Commission, then the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors adopts a resolution allowing us to submit a local coastal program amendment. We then submit to the state. The state gets their bite at the apple, and hopefully they don't have too many changes, and we'll come back with a certified chapter for the coastal zone for both cultivation and facilities. So I want to make it clear we're working on both of those right now, and they are high priorities.
Do you have a sense of timeline on all those?
You know, I'm hesitant to give you a particular date just because I don't want to misspeak, just because we still are in the process of reviewing those. Myself and County Council have a little bit of work that we have to do together on that. And then we're hoping that we would get to hearings, before the summertime, really, with Planning Commission would be our goal. But this is all just dependent upon, how that draft is and whether or not we're able to engage with Coastal Commission before that time, so.
And Hannah, the buzzer went off. So why don't we keep going around? We'll come back to you.
That sounds good.
Okay. Do we have any
I
other
have no other
cards?
speaker cards.
Any other? Yeah, Paul.
So, point of information, and it's in the records with the Board of Supervisors. Democracy prevailed with the Heritage Initiative for one. That was defeated by the county voters. Okay? So that was a firm statement that said they did not want self-appointed individuals governing the groves. So the Board of Supervisors is following democracy. Okay?
There's lots of reasons why.
Hi, my name's Erin Balsam. I'm born and raised in this community. Cannabis has been a part of my life since I can remember. Recently, I was employed full-time with the cannabis grow. Most of the cultivation happens on Mitchell Creek. For anybody who's opposed to some kind of resolution around this, I'd like to urge you to reconsider. My family also owns a local grocery store. They are experiencing a huge impact from the lack of revenue that is coming into the community because of cannabis, of the lack of farming that is happening. People are moving out of the area. It's affecting my family's business, and there's a lot of other businesses that will be affected in a very major way. There will be businesses that will be shut down. If you think that it will not impact you, you are mistaken. Most of my money is spent in the community. It's spent at the CD Star Center. It's spent at Down Home Foods. It's spent at Corners. It's spent on classes like Music Together, gymnastics. These are local programs that I do not believe would survive without this. My family depends on this industry, and our community is dependent on this industry. If we fail, property values will plummet. We will not have a community left. So I am urging the county and the community to please support this industry. Thank you.
I will try to understand my Russian accent. So, I own property on Mitchell Creek for 16 years. I've been growing for the last 6 years there. 4 of those years I'm paying taxes, huge taxes on everything. And I'm just like, I do understand people. Yeah, that place wasn't like Mitchell Creek, it wasn't the community for any sort of businesses. But the situation happened that we started growing their cannabis, and we did hope that we would be able to stay on that land, keep it very small, very sort of boutique style, very good quality, and it's only a few of us. It's Gabe is right. We're talking about 8, 10, maybe farms. And I, I don't have a child. My child is already a young man. But I'm looking at all these faces, and they have little children. And all these young people would move out from this community. And what is going to be on the coast? My great respect for the, older people. But I would love to see diversity. People different color, different age, different businesses. If it's not cannabis, what else? What else is going to be here for us to stay? And again, if I decided to move my business and I have a permit for cottage grower, it means that I will need to buy a new house somewhere else. Unfortunately, I don't have enough money. I cannot just I cannot make a down payment somewhere else, let's say in Sonoma County, and then try to sell my property here. I just we are not millionaires. We're just making enough to support our families. That's all. It's not that we have huge commercial, like tons of cannabis. It's like some criminal stuff involved in it. No, we came very openly. We not hiding anywhere. We want to do it right, but we need your help. We would love to stay on our land. I love what I do. I love growing weed. I believe in weed. I believe that that's absolutely great medicine. And that's I would love to be where I am. And not go back to Russia.
My name is Ron Hawk. I'm part of the Mitchell Creek position overlay zone. We're being misrepresented here. We're not opposed, at least the number of people that I've talked to. I got to know an awful lot of neighbors. We're not opposed to the marijuana industry at all. We don't want commercial businesses of any kind moving into our neighborhood. So our concern is about commercial operations in our residential 2-acre neighborhood, and we're not in opposition. And I'm sorry that this is having such a horrible impact. But the ordinance, I believe, should stand with the sunset rate, which was 3 years originally. And that was pretty much the consensus of the neighborhood as a 10-to-1 survey that the county sent out. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Tim Ayers. I work with Woodbine Farms, and I'd just like to say I'm not a co-owner. I'm an employee, with my own family, and I didn't get a vote in that, but the guy across the street with the Confederate flag hanging in his rearview mirror, he got the vote on it. My coworker didn't get a vote on it. Like a half dozen of us didn't get a vote. There's a lot of people here, and a lot of them don't show up. You see a lot of the farmers, you see a lot of the owners, but there's people in this community that are really suffering if this goes down. And I'm right there with them.
Yeah. I'm also a full-time employee with Woodbine Farms. I moved back here 10 years ago, and I saw that I could be somebody in this community, and I fell in love with cannabis. It allowed me the ability to live here, afford to live here, I have a living wage job. I'm buying a home here, and within a year's time, I may not be able to pay my mortgage. The ripple effect that is happening here, I know people here, and it's hard. It's a hard thing for our community because we're out front now. We're not in black, trying to do things right. Really like to see a way for the sunset to go on, so I don't have to leave this community because it doesn't have a future for me. And then,
Thank you. You can go back there.
Yeah, one of the good things that's come about around this Mitchell Creek controversy is that we've gotten to know our neighbors. People have really got to know each other, and there's been a lot of mutual respect that's been what I've seen developed, and I've really come to appreciate that. I don't think that there may have been misunderstandings along the way, but I think that most folks, that most of the folks in Mitchell Creek understand that There's nothing new going on here. This question of commercial is just a word that's now codified in state law. But this was always commercial, only it was black market. And now it's to be regulated and contained and controlled by the county and the state. So that word is, it seems to be a difficult word, at least for you, sir, and I totally respect what you're saying. And I know that you've met your neighbors and you know, they're good people. So I don't think that we're not talking about anything changing. It's just so, there's nothing different, there's nothing new here. And I think that on the whole, that our community in general will be more hurt by the loss of these farmers than if they would stay.
Yeah, I just want to make clear that we have a bigger dream. We do want to move out of the neighborhood. We do want to start an industrial park where all us farmers can move to and start real businesses. But a year is just not enough time to build an industrial park. That takes multiple years, and we're just asking for a little extension on that.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm Scott Sarandon, I'm with Delta Dip. But I totally respect what Ron's saying, that nobody who lives in a residential area wants a commercialization of that residential area. That's why we have zoning. That's why we have appropriate land use. That's the absolute, is that you can't set up a commercial business in a residential neighborhood without many restrictions. I do know people in this room that I recognize that have had businesses running out of their houses. All sorts of businesses, manufacturing businesses, daycare businesses, all sorts of things that have impacted traffic, noise, smells, and those have happened in residential neighborhoods. And there's processes for that. I think the use permit addresses that very well, because if the neighbors are impacted negatively, there's a complaint, there's a review process, and if it is upheld, if that complaint is valid, then the owners are put on notice, appropriate measures have to be taken, the impact has to be lessened, and they can continue on with their business. So there is middle ground, and we just have to find it. But we can't kill the goose that laid the golden egg during the process, and I'm afraid that that's what's happening. And with all due respect, because I know you're all my neighbors, we do have to get to the table and figure out a way forward, because I feel like we're at kind of the loggerheads right now. We're at a jam, and until we can just realize that, like what Ryan said, and what quite a few people here, we're poor families. I've lived here for 30 years. My kids have gone through the schools. We paid our taxes. We've done everything right, but I feel like we're being denied an opportunity to just stay here and continue to do what we're doing. The process has failed us, and we really need help.
Gabriel Martin, I'll take the opportunity to double dip as well, thank you. I'd just like to touch on the economic situation. I myself don't really like to dangle the carrot of economy, but the reality is that what I heard today is very true. What we are facing and seeing in our community is a downturn, not only at the register of normalized businesses to a tune of minimum 25% loss. Our sales tax base, I think we can look back 2 years and we will see a wholesale drop off. Scott pointed that out. And I believe that has a direct correlation to the board's decision to not create a path for small producers, and which has created this economic drop-off. It used to be that everybody had a little extra cash in their pocket and were able to fuel the economy that way. I understand the concept of not wanting commercial activity in a residential area. However, we are in the Mitchell Creek area, a rural residential area, and there is commercial activity allowed per the ordinance in our area. There's Bradley Stables, which is a huge facility, much larger than any of the impact that we're looking at producing, that exists there. I would also like to address the comment that we are not talking about allowing for commercial endeavors to come into our community. We are talking about commercial endeavors that have been existing. Mine for 10 years plus, with no impact negatively to my neighbors and to the community that I can see, and none that I can see from any of my co-cultivators. We aren't talking about opening up a giant green zone for infiltration by outside sources to come in and create something that isn't already there. So I would just like to point out that discrepancy. Also, I was a little lax in my speech before. I'd just like to address some basic things. The coastal zone. Why are we allowed all license types in the coastal zone? There are gas stations in the coastal zone. If a gas station, a petrol facility, and a auto garage is allowed in the coastal zone, there's no reason why any of the license types for cannabis should not be allowed in the coastal zone. Non-solvent-based extraction. I had a small business that ran side by side on my cultivation property that used ice and water to extract the properties of cannabis that are respected within the community. That is not allowed. Now, I don't understand why that's a situation. That makes absolutely no sense to me. That's an individual who has lost her livelihood, who is facing an incredible economic hardships in the moment. And we're talking about a space of 150 to 200 square feet. This zone right here, ice and water. That's just maddening. Transferability. Yeah, are you kidding me? I can't sell my permit. This makes absolutely no sense. If I could get a liquor license and I could hold on to that, and I could sell my business and I could sell my license to somebody else in the county in some other area, why can I not sell my cannabis license? A path for properties under 5 acres. What is this arbitrary 5-acre consideration? I have an outdoor facility in Branscombe that is 2-acre property that I don't even cultivate at anymore because it's not worth the headache to try to go through this with the sunset, yet everybody on Wilderness Lodge Road cultivates. They would have absolutely no problem with me continuing my operation because guess what? They're doing next. There should be a common sense approach to this dynamic that addresses what is really on the table. We have lost sight of that, I believe, through the aspect of fear and concerns, and all of these fears and concerns have not been realized. I would like to take it back to a common sense approach. And when we're talking about an agricultural commodity, and I look on our mission statement for our county, last time I checked, we're an ag county. That means that everything that we do on a board level and a community level is to promote agricultural endeavors. I believe we need to get back to the root of what Mendocino County really is about. We need to not worry about the label of cannabis versus wine versus apples. And I think that this impacts the lives of not only everybody in this room, but everybody outside of this room and everybody on the other side of that hill as well. So I beg of you to take into consideration and approach this from a common sense standpoint. Thank you.
Adam Mitchell again. It really would be a tragedy if this community was kept alive by cannabis, and then parts of it were unable to stay alive after cannabis became legal. I very much empathize with a desire not to over-industrialize a pristine residential area. And with respect for that, I think that some absolute prohibitions, such as prohibiting transfer to a non-resident or a sale of a permit in a residential area to a business that had been there to somebody outside would be prohibited. That hiring of new employees or expansion of territories for growing in these residential areas should be prohibited. But when there's talk of a single farm generating nearly $250,000 of tax revenue for the community, not to mention employing countless people who don't have the motive to be here, that don't have necessarily a vote on the table, some real in-depth form of an economic impact should certain sectors of this community be prohibited from cultivating, I think is very reasonable. Some sense of rational re-examination of the posit to prohibit with this additional information of how many people will be impacted, how many businesses will be impacted, how many people might not be able to afford their rents here. These are the sort of things that I think we really need to ask for the benefit of the community, with respect for people who inhabit a small segment of it. So I would encourage continued examination of shutting down any grower area. Thank you.
And I'm the triple dipper. I want to say a couple of things for those who don't understand that manufacturing and other license types will be allowed as soon as we get the coastal plan thing done. I don't know exactly in what form because we haven't been presented with it, but I just kind of wanted to straighten that out. It's not that there's a prohibition. In general, it's that we don't have an ordinance dealing with cannabis on the coast yet because of the coastal amendment, the plan amendment. So that's, just want to set that out there. I also want to set out that you know, when we were going through the very flawed and imperfect overlay process for Mitchell Creek, which the survey was extremely problematic and flawed in terms of the methodology and stuff like that. But nonetheless, when that process was happening, there were a number of meetings, and I know I saw a number of you there, and at the last one we had, where the county didn't even show up, I put forward a suggestion of individual use permits for existing people who are already permitted, and there seemed to be some receptiveness to that notion. And at the same time, I'm not trying to jam this down anybody's throat, but I think that if there's a continued conversation, that's where it could potentially pick up. And that does require a full hearing and the neighbors to be notified so that those who are truly affected are involved in that process. And with that said, I encourage those farmers who are in that neighborhood to do the work to bring those issues back to your immediate community and continue to have meetings, because obviously at the time it was enough. People just didn't want to deal with it anymore. And I don't know if that's still the case, but there's work on your end too to reconvene with some specific suggestions. Getting back to the agenda, sorry. And I also want to just say, as in terms of all this economic development stuff, it's all so relevant and so important. And there is an economic development ad hoc committee. And so, as John mentioned, I don't know exactly when they're meeting, we don't have a schedule, but I think that all of these issues will dovetail nicely into that. And we're fortunate because our two supervisors who are on that ad hoc committee are tied to the coast. Even though one of them doesn't represent the coast, one of them does, he lives here on the coast. So I think that, or right near the coast, and is very involved in the coast. So I think that they're going to be extremely interested in hearing all of these issues. I look forward to a schedule of when they might meet, and I'm sorry to look at you because it's not your committee, but if you can maybe on Tuesday's meeting bring up a question of the calendaring of it, because these economic development issues are so critical to the survival of people who live here on the coast, who have been particularly impacted, not just the Mitchell Creek thing, but because of the coastal plan issue. I think that deserves special attention.
I have a question. May I ask?
Sure.
Is the coastal cannabis production prohibition in the coastal zone, is that a county thing or a statewide thing?
It's a county thing. It's only that there is no ordinance. It's not a prohibition. It's that there's no affirmative license that somebody could apply for. And because they only dealt with the inland ordinance, first cultivation and then facilities of non-cultivation businesses, and they always do that, they do the inland zoning codes first, and then they move to the coastal because of the whole coastal commission permission and the elaborateness. Yeah. So it's no, there's not really a prohibition, it's just there's no path for a legal way to do it. Sure. But getting back to this agenda, which is applicable, I think that the enterprise zones, and this does cross over to the economic development ad hoc, but item number 3D, in terms of more than 2 permits per parcel be allowed and total square footage and stuff like that. As I said last night, I'm very much in favor of anything that would allow an economy of scale for small farmers to come together and work collaboratively. And I don't mean just in a formal cooperative, because unfortunately the state passed legislation which is extremely restrictive for cooperative associations. But in general, having a facility that could accommodate more than 1 permit on it. And again, I'm not, there's very little appropriate land on the coast, and that's unfortunate. And so I think that when we're dealing with the coastal issues, and not just in the coastal zone, but just in general the coastal community, I think that a special lens has to be applied towards giving additional consideration because of how zoning is established already and how it disfavors the rules that have been applicable for inland. And so that I hope that when the cultivation ordinance for the coastal zone is considered, that it's not automatic that the exact same rules are applied, because the land availability is different here. And I'm not sure how that would be or what I'm suggesting, but I just feel it's an extremely important lens to look at this. And then when you add to that the fact that it was 2.5 years ago that the board directed that there be a development of a coastal permitting process for cultivation, and for a whole variety of issues, nobody's particular fault, fires and understaffing and all inadequate consultants and everything else, we're still here waiting for it, and it's still going to be quite a while, and people have no path forward for, I'd say, a year or 2, and that's going to have a tremendous impact on the financial health of the community.
I have a question for
It's banana.
I want to know why the county is considering opening up rangeland for cannabis cultivation, so we get out of neighborhoods. But why is TPZ off the list? Like seeing, everyone is rooting from the coast, we all have the same interests, we want to build an awesome place to live. So I'm trying just giving you my anger.
Yeah.
I apologize.
I don't think that I can adequately answer that because I'm not the policy suggester, but I believe that the understanding that I have of the reasoning behind it is that resource lands need to be treated differently, and again, there's an argument here that was applied to rangeland that maybe is applied to coastal area, and that's what I was talking about, a different lens, and that is that there were so many inappropriate zoning choices made, and even though the zoning code and the general plan amendment was done, and it took 10 years, and it was very painful, it just, I think that there's inappropriate zoning or categorizations of zoning for different lands that were just done a long time ago and perpetuated. And with that said, wait, one last thing, and that is that rangeland specifically allows for row and crop fields. And so I think that that's a way that they can justify saying, okay, maybe we need to consider it. But I'm not the person who...
TPZ has the
And
same.
a couple of things. One, you made the statement that you are not the proposer of the legislation.
Well, I'm not.
Okay? That seems to fly in the face of reality based on the fact that you presented numerous times. Secondly, you made the statement, point of information, the 2 supervisors that are on the economic development are both within the coastal zone.
I'm sorry, clarify, and one of them doesn't live in the coastal zone, but lives here on the coast.
Their districts include the coastal zone.
One of them does, and one of them does not, but he
Their
lives here.
districts include the coastal zone.
Okay. But as far as me not being the proponer, I was referring, he was asking me about the rangeland, and I'm not a board of supervisors, I'm just.
Well, I apologize. I was asking you because I know John Hashtag is new, so I figured. Yeah, I would like to ask you to tell us why TV is not capable.
Well, my understanding was that this, the rangeland, you can't have the crops, and so.
But that doesn't address TPC. That doesn't address TPC though.
Yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah, okay. It's a general
Before I get to your question, is that I was just at the West Company board meeting yesterday, and West Company does a lot of small business development classes, and so they're really looking to help the economy of our county, and they do provide all these business development classes such as, marketing and accounting and all those things you need for small businesses. And so it's they cannot focus, they cannot say this is just for cannabis. They offer classes for everyone. And so anyway, people should take advantage of those. It's a great resource that we have. And we're putting in, county resources into that. There's federal money in it. That's why they can't deal with the cannabis. But when they have their workshops, check it out. Or their website.
So I'm curious, without proof of prior cultivation for 2016 on TP zone land.
Can you speak up a little bit for us?
Yeah, so without proof of prior cultivation before 2016 on TP zone land, I'm wondering if that's ever going to be amended so that people who are on TP zone land without proof of prior cultivation will be able to ever get a small use permit or a cultivation permit.
Well, the way the ordinance was written originally, that those are supposed to be phased out. And so, you wouldn't be able to get it if you didn't have proof of prior. And with phase 3, you wouldn't be able to go into rangeland or
Even with proof of prior cultivation, phase 3 will phase that out?
No, it's 2 different things. If you have proof of prior, you can stay in TPZ. If you don't have proof of prior and you're applying for a new application when phase 3 starts, TPZ is not eligible.
So I apologise for arriving late, so I've missed most of the content, but and you've heard me speak at the supervisor meetings. I just want to reiterate my point of view here, which is that there's a lot of tax revenue that can be generated here on the coast. There's people's jobs and livelihoods which are at stake here. Many of the people in this room are from the Mitchell Creek overlay area that received rejection and didn't go through. But these properties, these people have been in these properties up to 20 years and more, doing what they've been doing. They've purchased these properties. They built infrastructure on these properties. Infrastructure that, if it sunsets out, they cannot take away. They will lose all of their investment. They will lose their livelihood, and all their employees will lose their livelihoods too. And I really want to urge the board to facilitate a way to grandfather these businesses in. Under the use permits that we go through, there is a criteria And as there is legislated for all of the things that we have to adhere to, which is stronger than any other industry, stronger than the vineyard, stronger than somebody down the road growing 7,000 pounds of cabbage that doesn't have to worry about their water usage, about their employees, their culverts, their driveways, their pesticides. None of that is applicable, but we have to hold to a very high standard. And in the use permit that we go through, that is provided for. If we don't hold to these standards, then our permits will be revoked. So as long as we are in good standing, this is not, and it should not ever been a vote by people on, it's like Survivor. If the neighborhood doesn't like cannabis, then they're able to vote you off the island, and that's just not appropriate. This is legislated. This is America. Forgive me, but in this country, it's my understanding that what somebody does on their own land is completely up to them as they are in compliance with the law. And the letter of the law in this county, in this state, is that you can grow cannabis on these parcels. So I think the overlay program is unethical, it's immoral, and it's completely unfair. It's not appropriate that what is good for these people over here doesn't apply to these people over there. That's just absolutely wrong. And the county is imposing a massive hardship on all of these families and businesses by threatening to close them down with the sunset clause when they were fully compliant before 2015 was it when it was implemented, or 2016 when it was suggested. They got their permits, they complied with the Attorney General state guidelines, they purchased their property and did everything to code with regards to building permits and power and electricity, and to be able to penalise them this way and ask them to shut down because the stigma of cannabis is just absolutely wrong.
We're getting to the time.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a side note on Hannah's comments, and thank you very much, Hannah, for pointing that out. We do not have an ordinance addressing the coastal zone and its license types. However, I would like to point out that Fort Bragg is in process, and as a result of their, I don't know if it's an ordinance, but whatever it is, they're not allowing cannabis businesses of any type to be in the coastal zone. The coastal zone in Fort Bragg is the other side of Highway 1. We've got lumber yards, and we used to have a mill that didn't close down because of environmental impact, it closed down because of non-viability. What I'm getting at is that our board's restrictive ordinance for cannabis cultivation needs to be taken into consideration when it starts creating language for the coastal zone. I highly doubt that it's just going to open the gates to all license types on the coastal zone, and I employ anybody to have their voice be heard, to express to the board, to open it up to cannabis license types on the coastal zone. Thank you.
Yeah. I apologize for coming in late. I just wanted to have my voice heard about the transferability issue. I think you guys already touched on it. It sounded like I asked somebody, and it sounded like you just touched on it briefly. I have a piece of property that requires a lot of input and expenditure of money to bring it up to the standards that are supposed to. For the county, and I'm up for that. But I also want to improve it and do things that make me have a better shot at the market, like the light deprivation and things like that. For me to put anything like a light deprivation engineered building in up there on my property, and not ever be able to sell that and recoup that investment, it makes it unreachable or unsensible for me. And I don't think it's fair that you guys have made this non-transferability. I believe it was done for a good reason, and there was a big land grab, and a lot of people come from out of the area trying to buy the licenses and things like that. But someone like me who's going to eventually approach a retirement age, I can't sell my property and to somebody else to grow cannabis there. And anything I do to improve it toward the cannabis, it's for nothing, because I can't recoup that to sell to somebody else and they can't go use that. And it's kind of unprecedented. I don't see it in other industries, and I think it was a situation of the right, it was for the right idea. It was, good intentions, but I think it's a bad outcome because it makes it really hard for me to want to put any more money in that property and it makes it hard for me to look toward the future of investing in this cannabis industry. And I've already put a lot of money into it. And I have things like balloon payment on the property, real things that, finance on my property. And to try to improve it and know that I can't even recoup that later, it's hard to do. I don't want to do that. And I just think that it's unfair because when I retire, I can't sell that to somebody. Now, if I had a winery and I built a big new winery, when I retire, I could sell my winery. And I don't understand the logic of this. Yeah. It doesn't seem fair.
So that's going to be revisited.
Okay.
By the board.
Yeah. All right.
And
I hope they change that.
so any last quick comments? Yeah, one last one.
Totally appreciate the one for the West Company. They are awesome people. They do help small business development. I've had numerous conversations with the West Company around cannabis, although they cannot provide services directly to cannabis. They're totally willing to help. They have come to me and asked me, how can they help? They can't. This is going to come from the Board of Supervisors. It's going to come from appropriate legislation. We cannot get retrained to work at Rossi's. We cannot get retrained to be school teachers. I'm 55. My viability in the marketplace is probably very limited. So retraining is just not an option for me. I've got to keep on the path that I'm on. But I do encourage anybody who is thinking about retraining, jump over to the West Company and they can probably teach you how to tell you.
And they say that their best source of getting clients is through word of mouth.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're great folks, and they provide great services, but they're at a loss right now because they're just watching this kind of overwhelming attrition of people that have no place to go and no options.
Okay, so really I wanted to thank all of you because this was a great conversation. It was very civil and we had different points of view on different issues, and I really appreciate it because I'm new to being a supervisor. I come from education, and it's a learning experience for me, and certainly I hope to take this back and create good policy that works for our county.
Thank you. Thank you.